We're peaceful, these protesters cry out to passing police cars as they lead an injured man away in Nairobi. That doesn't stop an officer firing a tear gas canister at the group. The injured were taken away by ambulance and by motorbike too. At least 16 were killed at anti-government protests across Kenya, with 400 injured, say doctors and human rights groups, and at least 8 treated for gunshot wounds. Most of the dead, according to Amnesty Kenya, were killed by police. Thousands had taken to the streets to mark the anniversary of the anti-tax protests of 2024, which saw Parliament stormed, 64 killed and dozens reportedly abducted. What began last year as a cry against the cost of living has morphed into horror over the brutality meted out in response.
Enough! The blood that we have shed is enough! There is no blood left in our flag anymore!
We are not scared to say it. We will say it boldly. We will say it courageously. Police brutality must end and Ruto must go.
Many of the protesters want President William Ruto to go. He had initially offered some concessions after last year's demonstrations, but his is a government defiant, with authorities ordering a media blackout, demanding that TV stations stop covering the protests.
We have been switched off from a mainstream, but you can catch us live from YouTube.
They moved across to social media instead. These are being called the Gen Z protests, and authorities can't contain them online, cracking down offline instead. Justice for Albert Ojwang, this placard reads. The killing of the 31-year-old teacher and blogger earlier this month sparked this latest round of protests. He'd been accused of defaming Kenya's deputy police chief, and while police initially said his injuries were self-inflicted, 3 officers and 3 civilians have since been charged with his murder. His grief-stricken father is looking for answers.
I still have the same questions that I asked when he was being arrested. What are the charges against my son? Who is the complainant that caused my son to be taken from my home to Nairobi? What is the weighty mistake that caused my son to be taken from home and ultimately killed?
Then on June the 17th, an AP photographer caught the moment an unarmed street vendor, Boniface Kariuki, was approached by police, and a warning: these images are deeply distressing. You see an officer shooting him point blank in the temple. Mr. Kariuki is currently on life support. The officers are arraigned in court and under investigation. On the same day as Mr. Kariuki's shooting, Reuters filmed men chasing protesters with whips and sticks, later seen standing near a police car.
Motorcycle riders have been given money and called from, I'm not sure where, to come and beat protesters who have their right to protest.
This Tuesday, the US Embassy and other diplomatic missions released a joint statement urging police to abide by a court ruling banning them from using plainclothes officers in unmarked vehicles. It spoke too of concerns over, quote, hired goons, referring to armed gangs that had been attacking protesters.
The goons were being escorted by police as they terrorized protesters.
Kenya's police spokesperson and the Nairobi County Governor both deny accusations of affiliations with these groups.
We are peaceful! We are peaceful!
A state-funded rights group has reported the abductions of more than 80 government critics since June 2024, something President William Ruto first said was fake news and then promised to crack down on. The words of Kenya's Interior Minister this morning, describing the deadly protests as terrorism disguised as dissent, could spell further repression as the country smarts from yet more violence. Joining me now from Nairobi is Zaina Kombo, a lawyer who works for Amnesty International. Zaina, thank you for joining us. We know that several people have been killed. Can you give us a sense of what's been going on the ground?
So the protests yesterday turned violent, and as of last night, we have about 16 fatalities and over 400 injuries recorded as of last night. There were also allegations of sexual assault of women.
And do you have evidence that this violence is being meted out by police?
Yes, in some instances, citizens have been recording and documenting most of these cases. and the gunshot wounds are there. There are photos and some videos showing the brutality meted upon citizens, either those who are protesting, and some others have been confirmed to be stray bullets. But the injuries and the fatalities, the number of shed have been verified and confirmed.
Early this month, armed attackers were filmed assaulting some of the protesters in plain clothes. Do we know who these people are?
We do not have actual information as to whether they are former police officers or whether they are like the relationship they have. But we know they are young people who are potentially jobless, and they were just misused by those who hired them to come and attack other Kenyans who are fighting for good governance in this country.
And what has been the government's response to all of this?
So definitely the government has denied involvement and said that they have distanced themselves from the allegations of hiring goons, and they vowed to protect property and lives. But videos and other documentary evidence show that they were in the company of police officers. So we continue to monitor the situation.
William Ruto's government has been accused of democratic backsliding. We saw that they imposed a media blackout on TV news stations. Have you been seeing a lot of this kind of thing of late?
Recently, there has been a lot of suppression of dissent. And we have also seen a blatant disregard of court orders, because there was a court order that issued conservatory orders against the shutting down of media houses. But we saw that being violated by the order that the media stations should stop live coverage.
How much is the government cracking down on journalists and civil society?
Every time there's a protest, potentially journalists are targeted, civil society or the human rights defenders are also quite targeted.
How common are those abductions now?
It's been quite common, and we suspect that this is part of the tool of suppression against any form of dissent, and especially those who are tech savvy and digitally savvy. So if you post something, it's now being used as a tool of intimidation for people not to express themselves, for people not to say, to share their frustrations with the world.
I also wanted to ask you about the killing of blogger Albert Ojwang, which was initially denied by the police. Subsequently, 3 of them were arrested and charged with his murder alongside 3 civilians. I mean, it's a really shocking case. What can you tell us about where that stands and how people are feeling about it?
So the case began, the arrest began like any other arrest, where, the person was extracted from their home. And at that time, the father thought this was a normal arrest. And if there was anything wrong that the son had done, then he would definitely find him the following day, and he would be arraigned in court. But it turned out to be something else. They went all the way, I think it was about 400 kilometers, drove 400 kilometers away only for him to be found dead the following day. And this has, caused a lot of anxiety and lack of trust. We already had a trust deficit, but this deeply entrenched the trust deficit between citizens and security officials, because then it means that even when you're arrested, the people who are meant to give you protection in a cell could as well just turn wild and do something like that.
Zaina Kombo, thank you.
The death toll from Wednesday's nationwide anti-government protests in Kenya has risen to 16, with most of the dead reportedly killed by police, says rights group Amnesty International. Hundreds of people were also wounded, with local media, an eyewitness, saying that security forces fired tear gas and water cannons to disperse crowds crowds in the capital, Nairobi. In a joint statement, Kenya Medical Association, Law Society of Kenya, and the Police Reforms Working Group said that of those injured, several had suffered gunshot wounds. Thousands of people had taken to the streets in cities across the country to mark last year's demonstrations in which more than 60 people died. They were protesting against a controversial tax bill. President William Ruto later withdrew the proposed tax hike, but people are still angry over the use of excessive force by the security forces. There were more demonstrations earlier this month over the death of a blogger in police custody. Like and subscribe for more. Thanks.